everybody, and thank you for joining us. I hope you can hear me well. My name is Kalina, and today I'll be presenting with AECO Space to show you the latest developments in V.Ray for SketchUp. If you cannot hear me well or there is any issue, you can always drop it as a question in the webinar panel, and I'll be sure to check it out. So, in this webinar, we'll explore the latest updates of V.Ray Next for SketchUp. And since a few days ago, we had a completely new service pack, a new update coming for V.Ray Next for SketchUp, update 1. I was super excited today to show you some of the features included in update 1 as well. So basically, we'll be focusing on the two releases that happened for SketchUp in the late years, which are V.Ray Next and V.Ray Next Update 1. So basically, since we have the latest version, I'll show you the latest features and some great ones from the next storyline you may have missed or forgotten about, or you're just excited to see again. After the webinar, there will be some time for questions. So at any point, if you have anything you want to ask, anything you want me to elaborate on, feel free to drop it in the Q&A panel. And after the webinar finishes, I'll be sure to check all of your questions. In today's webinar, we'll focus on V.Ray Next and the V.Ray Next workflow. What has changed since the latest version, since V.Ray 3 point something? Why is V.Ray Next code basically next, and how it can improve your workflow? What difference does it make when it comes to CPU and GPU pipelines? And of course, in the end, as I said, we'll have some time for questions and answers. Before we start with that, I want to introduce you to AECO Space if you haven't met us already. Basically, we are Sofia-based V.Ray training center and official V.Ray distributor for Eastern Europe. We are also official distributor of SketchUp, so at any point you want to acquire the software, either SketchUp or V.Ray, or of course a nice bundle of both, you can always go to www.aeco.space and follow us and ask us any questions you may like. It's basically a place for 3D artists and place for future 3D artists where people can learn, explore, and find the best software for their purposes. Going back to this webinar, it's a very dear topic to my heart because V.Ray is one of the best render engines when it comes to architectural rendering in the world. It has proven to be this over the years for many reasons, and one of them is the fact that it's always developing. Today is a great example of that because my webinar was planned for V.Ray Next, but there came V.Ray Next Update 1, and I couldn't resist just to show you the latest developments. So V.Ray is always listening, and you see some of the features are actually improvements on requested features, are basically based on the feedback of you, the clients. Another great thing about V.Ray in SketchUp is that it's seamlessly integrated. So we don't need to export anything or go into additional windows even. We can just do everything in our normal SketchUp workflow and just render it in V.Ray to receive that photorealistic quality we can expect. V.Ray is also very flexible, allowing you to concentrate on whatever you prefer. Meaning that if you want to go technical, you absolutely can go technical. And if you just want to be more creative, more artistic, V.Ray allows you to focus on at least settings as possible and focus more on your creativity, on your vision to change the world. Since V.Ray is not only for SketchUp, there is also V.Ray for 3ds Max, Revit, Rhino, so on. V.Ray is actually optimized when it comes to the cross-platform approach. So if you have colleagues or friends, or even you yourself are working on another platform as well, for example, Max or Revit, you can easily transfer assets between V.Ray for Max and V.Ray for SketchUp, and be sure to have the same results because the V.Ray core is the same. The mathematics, the rendering, it's V.Ray. And if you haven't tested V.Ray for SketchUp, even after this webinar, you can always go to chaosgroup.com and download a 30 days free trial to test on your own SketchUp version. To be full functioning, so there won't be any limitations, you get the full experience. I have only one request. Please wait for our webinar to finish so you'll find some interesting feature to test when you download your free copy. Of course, if you're interested in acquiring the software for yourself, you can contact us as well to get your own personal copy. Now, talking about V.Ray Next. Many people have used V.Ray for SketchUp since 2 point something. And the biggest release, the biggest difference was between 2 and 3, where basically with V.Ray 3, Chaos Group revolutionized the whole pipeline when it comes to rendering in SketchUp, showing a completely new, fast and easy to work with plugin for rendering in SketchUp. With V.Ray Next, this line continues, and it's basically allowing us take advantage of everything that V.Ray 3 had to offer and build on top of that. So V.Ray Next, some people confuse it, it's actually V.Ray 4, but the name is Next, that's the only difference, it's just a new major release. V.Ray Next comes with its own faster rendering, easier control and optimized UI. So it's easier than ever to start rendering in V.Ray for SketchUp, taking advantage of this UI, which we'll see today. For those of you who may be rendering on GPU, on graphics cards, there are a few optimizations concerning that, and now it's the best time to start rendering on GPU if you are interested. I just want to clarify that in this webinar, I'll be rendering on CPU. And many of the features I'm showing also work on the GPU. I'll just mention a few new optimizations when it comes to the GPU. But this webinar will focus on CPU rendering. Have in mind, since GPU and CPU is a very dear topic to my heart, I just want to mention, both are correct ways to render, both work great, both give you excellent results and allow you to visualize your ideas. Just, I have one tiny favor to ask. If you start a project on CPU, please finish it on CPU. And if you start a project on GPU, the same. Please finish it on GPU. Because if you switch in the middle of the project, it's normal to experience differences in rendering, be frustrated maybe with that, and that's something we don't want. So have that in mind. If you pick a rendering engine for the project, stick to that engine to the end. Both support interactive and both support full production rendering. And even you'll see with the latest release, the GPU also has bucket rendering, so you can feel right at home. It all depends only on the hardware you want to invest in. So that's the only thing. I just wanted to mention that GPU is GPU, CPU is CPU, both were great. Just pick one whenever it comes to your project. Besides that, V.Ray Next came with a few distinguished new features, not only the faster rendering and the optimized UI, which you see right away when you open the software, but there are a couple, and by couple I mean a lot, of new features optimizing the workflow on a daily basis. V.Ray Next feature list, or if you want to be more concentrated in what are those features. Besides the faster CPU rendering, an absolutely redesigned asset editor even compared to V.Ray 3.6. We have the adaptive DOM light, which is a speed optimization allowing you to render faster images with DOM light without the need of skylight portals. We also have a few smart optimizations, and by smart I mean based on your scene and optimizations learning about your scene and adjusting to that, like the auto exposure and auto white balance. Actually, the adaptive DOM light is also part of this line in a way that it sees your scene and renders the best possible way when it comes to your scene. We have the implementation on the NVIDIA AI denoiser, which is a wonderful way to make rendering faster even in the look and development stage. Some of you may be familiar with the V.Ray denoiser. It's still there, it's still working beautifully. There's just another type called the NVIDIA AI denoiser, which is amazingly fast, especially in the look and development part of the scene. We have a few very interesting scene interaction tools working directly in SketchUp viewport. And we have the V.Ray scene importer, allowing you to export V.Ray scenes from any other V.Ray out there, import them in SketchUp, and render them directly there. So this is part of the cross-platform approach I mentioned. You can basically export a V.Ray scene from any V.Ray software, even if you want V.Ray from Maya, and render it in SketchUp with proper materials and proper illumination. We have also a few new render elements and even the possibility to denoise per render element, which was one of the highly requested features when the denoiser came out in the beginning. Some of those I have the time to show you today, and some of those I'll be sure to remind you to explore on your own. And since I have the latest update, V.Ray Next Update 1, I don't want to distinguish so much when it comes to this next, this update 1. If you install it today, you get the latest version. So I'll go over the feature list for V.Ray Next Update 1, and then we'll go into SketchUp and start rendering actually. As I mentioned, there are a few optimizations when it comes to GPU rendering as well, and I'll just tell you those if you want to test them on your own graphics cards. Not only is the GPU faster than ever, it also supports bucket rendering, allowing you to view the production rendering right at home. It supports the photorealistic materials V.Ray scans rendered on the GPU, awesome for product design, for interior design, and for those of you who dabble in exterior, the GPU now supports environment fog and for creating beautiful volumetrics with proper illumination. And then we have update 1. Not only does it have better integration with SketchUp supporting, for example, texture colorization, which you see today, the IPR, the interactive production rendering, is faster than ever. This combined with the NVIDIA AI denoiser, which I mentioned, makes things really, really fast, especially when developing the scene. Then we have Cryptomatte support for those of you who want to have advanced compositing with automatic IDs for every object in the scene. We have something that I've been desiring for such a long time, which is a Kelvin temperature color picker, especially useful for white balance modifications and light modifications. And we have additional post-production effects with lens effects, added dust and scratches for creating more realistic renders. All of this sounds awesome, and I think now would be a great time to actually go in SketchUp itself using V.Ray Next Update 1 and start rendering those. If we have the time after, I'll remind you of one of my favorite features, which is an oldie but goodie now we can say, which is actually the V.Ray Cloud. The V.Ray Cloud allows us with one click to export directly into a huge render base up in the cloud and scale our project massively without the need to require additional hardware. And a great thing is that I'll try to even send an image to the cloud and render it as we speak, so you can see how easy it is to offload work from your personal computer and send it up in the sky. So let's go into SketchUp itself. So as we mentioned, V.Ray Next came with its new and optimized user interface, which is the optimization of the V.Ray asset editor in SketchUp. The logic is pretty much what we have known from V.Ray 3.4, 3.6, and so on, where we have this panel divided into 3 parts with 2 beautiful arrows on the sides, but there are a few additional changes when it comes to this. The material parts now supports only the list of materials used in your scene, and if you want to take advantage of the real-world preview, the rendered preview, now it's on the right. The preview itself has a few additional features, where, for example, you can stop the rendering and resume because this is rendered in real time. And of course, there manipulate the scene in any way you like. Same thing goes the addition with preview with lights, where when picking up a light, you can see the settings in the preview. window even see light contribution. Just from here, get a basic idea of how it is illuminating what is showing in your scene. So this preview will be working for lights for materials. We also have the dynamic geometry panel, which is an oldie but goodie, as they say, but we have the addition of two new panels. We have a render elements dedicated panel, and the great thing to mention, as we'll be using this one, is that if you do right click, you have the possibility to add render elements, and same goes for materials, for lights. Right click on the spot allows us to actually add new geometries. And then we have also a specific panel for textures where you can see all the textures implemented in your scene and have faster access to them. And you can also see that they work beautifully with the preview, allowing us to see what's going on without starting to render. Then we have the settings, which are also optimized, and there is one thing coming even with V.Ray Next Update 1, which is the fast switch for denoising. As you can see, super quickly we can enable denoiser and pick from V.Ray or NVIDIA AI denoiser. I will demonstrate this one in a moment. And then one more thing that came with V.Ray Next was the scene integration panel, which allows us to take advantage of some V.Ray features directly in SketchUp, directly designed for SketchUp. So we have, for example, the remove materials option. If you have a geometry line from before or downloaded from the warehouse and the materials are not working in your way, you can remove them with one click. And then do trip-runner mapping, for example, with just a few clicks, spherical mapping, and use the scene interaction tool, which you can see is integrated in the viewport, allowing us to see groups and objects. And here you find the light interaction tool where you can change the light intensity just by sliding in the viewport. This is just for your information, and the best way to check this one out would be to explore it in your own scenes to get a feeling of how it works. Going back to the materials, of course, we still have the beautiful V.Ray for SketchUp materials library with over 500 architecturally optimized materials on the left. So never worry, it's here, it's just a little bit more organized. Let's explore some of the features. As we mentioned, the NVIDIA AI denoiser is just available for us here. So it's on, and let's start rendering. Just like the V.Ray denoiser, the NVIDIA denoiser is a post-process effect, so we need some rendering to start denoising. But it actually clears out very fast, and even after one pass, very quickly, it gives us a pretty accurate result of our image. Yes, some people may say it's a bit blurred, as you see for yourselves, but come on, how fast was that? For just a few seconds, I'm getting a pretty accurate preview, and since this is interactive rendering and the image is continuing to render, the denoiser will also get better quality as the rendering does. It takes advantage of your NVIDIA graphics card automatically, so you don't need to adjust or select anything. It just finds it on its own and starts denoising. This is wonderful, again, as I said, especially in looking development, because it allows you to take a better look at your image without being distracted by noise. And as an artist, I can say that this has saved me many nerves, just because I get a much better feeling of my image right away without the noise distracting me. As you see from the RGB color, it's still very noisy, but the NVIDIA AI denoiser is doing marvels around here. So at any point, you can just use this one, enable it, and use it even in interactive. And as I'm saying, interactive, okay, you can see that I'll move my camera, one pass or so. And we have a denoised image, which of course will get better over time. It also creates this artistic effect of sort of watery paints, and if you want to use that, of course, nobody can stop you. Okay, so this is the NVIDIA AI denoiser. And as I mentioned, update 1 came, and I want to show you another feature coming from update 1, which is the possibility to take advantage of SketchUp's colorize settings. And those of you who are native to SketchUp know that if you use a texture in SketchUp, you have the possibility here to change its color, adding sort of a filter. Now this is absolutely supported in V.Ray, so I can enable it and change the texture. Okay, let's restart the render. Okay, apparently I picked the very wrong material here, but the idea is that this is supporting colorization from SketchUp's textures. Let's try with another one. Okay, so basically this is supported in the latest version. I'm having some issues, sorry. This is the difficulties of live television, of live rendering. Okay, so let's continue, not to waste time. I'll be sure to check this one out. Okay. One of the highly requested features that came as part of V.Ray Next was the denoise per element, render element, which is now absolutely possible in V.Ray for SketchUp. So in every render element from this panel here, you notice that there is the switch to say denoise. This allows us to have the render element denoised and available for compositing later if you want to take advantage of it as a separate channel. So when you add the render element, just be sure if you want to denoise to click on the denoise option and of course have the denoiser enabled, because otherwise how it's going to denoise. So besides that, let's check this one out and check another render element. It's actually part of your next update 1, which is support for Cryptomatte. Cryptomatte is a very typical compositing render element, which allows us to have automatic IDs for every object in the scene. It's mostly used in Nuke, but thanks to some plugins for Photoshop, you can actually take advantage of this one in Photoshop as well. And I suggest you check EXR.io as a plugin for Photoshop, which is a free one, just to check, to be able to import multi-channel EXRs in Photoshop easily. For the Cryptomatte to work, we need to have bucket rendering available, which I'm going to do now. Okay, so we have interactive, progressive, off, meaning buckets, and let's start rendering. I'm using draft as a setting just to be sure that we are going to have render fast to see the Cryptomatte and see the denoised render elements. Okay, V.Ray is rendering as we speak. In the render elements, even now you can see that the Cryptomatte is being generated. Of course, its quality depends on the draft render settings, which is normal. I just wanted to show you how the Cryptomatte looks. And if you save a multi-channel, EXR from the V.Ray frame buffer. You can import this one using a plugin in Photoshop and use it as masks automatically. Okay. We have the denoiser render element and the RGB pass. So you can see even for such a quick render, the denoiser did an amazing job based on the RGB pass. And then, of course, we have the denoised render elements, which for the quality we have, you can see that they are denoised. Maybe they would be much better if we left it to render for a little longer, but as we all know, denoising is based on the render quality. Another optimization that is allowing me to render this image so fast is the adaptive dome light. The adaptive dome light allows us to basically render the same image for much less time just by clicking adaptive here. So this makes it work without skylight portals and makes it much faster. And to show you those, I'll just browse a few rendered images beforehand so you see the difference. Going into adaptive dome, I just need to browse the images and you can see adaptive dome light off. This image was rendered for 6 minutes. And if we open adaptive dome on and save it to see the render time, this image was rendered for 3 minutes. So we have 6 minutes versus 3 minutes, maybe a little difference in between, but it won't be noticeable comparing the speed. Come on, it's twice as fast. Of course, the speed optimization when it comes to the adaptive dome light depends on your scene and works for dome light illumination. But now, if you want to use dome light, you don't need skylight portals, which is also a speed optimization. Speaking of speed optimizations that are part of V.Ray, the next one is coming with update 1, and it's actually a much faster IPR or interactive production rendering. In order to show you this, I want to show you a really large scene, which is this one. Okay, so we see we have an exterior with the whole city, with boats and skyscrapers. So it's not the easiest thing to render ever. And I'm going to start interactive rendering directly. Of course, it takes the normal time to initialize render, to send the scene to V.Ray and start rendering. But from then on, you'll see for yourselves how faster it is. Okay, the render has loaded. By the way, have in mind that I'm rendering on a laptop. It may be powerful for a laptop, but it's still a laptop. So I'm doing it real time, and you see how fast it is. Let's add a little color correction, even as a post effect, because I think the scene looks better with that. Okay. And you see this is IPR in real time, interactive production, the denoiser is off. So super fastly, we get a great idea what is going on in the scene, and since this is interactive, the rendering is getting better over time as we speak. This update, the fast IPR, the fast interactive render, will be on by default, so we don't need to change anything. You will just notice it when you start rendering scenes, how much faster you can use IPR to adjust your scene, the look and development part, and so on. And if this is not fast enough for you, if maybe you want something additional, you can always enable the NVIDIA AI denoiser to work together with the fast IPR and give you great results in basically no time at all. When it comes to the denoiser, The idea is that the NVIDIA AI denoiser gives us better results for look and development, and the V.Ray denoiser is better for final rendering because it's much more detailed. But this is just a general guideline, nothing is a rule. So if you feel like you like what you see from the NVIDIA AI denoiser, you can use it as a final render, or if you like the V.Ray denoiser, of course, you can use it during yeah, IPR as well. Okay. So we have the IPR, we have the NVIDIA denoising on top in just a second. And as we mentioned, the image will get better over time since this is IPR. And some of you may have tested the cloud when it comes to fast rendering. Some of you may haven't. And that's exactly why I want to show you how the V.Ray cloud works inside SketchUp. Just to remind you or give you a glimpse of another world. We can stop this image, and even as we speak, even as we do our webinar, I can send my image to be rendered on the V.Ray cloud. How we do that is super easy. We just basically set the settings from SketchUp itself. So absolutely be sure to pick the quality, the type of rendering, progressive or bucket, and the resolution. Actually, the resolution you can change later, but the quality and the render engine should be set in the initial platform in SketchUp in our case. So I'm going to say quality, let's do medium, a little bigger resolution, and then I'll export to the cloud either from the toolbar here or from the drop down. Here I have the cloud icon. One click, and it's sending my scene over the internet to the cloud. We'll have a window opened in a moment. All of this is, of course, based on your internet connection. So it's basically sending the scene via your internet connection. Okay. So we have the V.Ray cloud open. Some textures may be missing, but I'm sure that the scene renders well since I have tested it. And then I can go and submit the job to the cloud. Okay, I just pick a folder, name my scene. I can always change the resolution here, but as you see, there are no settings for rendering quality, so be sure to have the rendering quality set in the native platform in SketchUp in our case. And I click submit. V.Ray is uploading my scene, and I can go to the cloud portal and view my job, which is starting to render. While this is happening, while it's rendering, I can continue to work in SketchUp and basically do whatever I want with the scene. It's already set in the cloud, or continue working with another scene. This makes one of the greatest advantages of the cloud, because not only is my computer free to continue working, but I can scale really fast, meaning that if I have a large project coming, I don't need to go and buy more machines. I can just get a few cloud credits and send it directly to render on the Chaos Cloud. Chaos Cloud is, of course, available for other platforms as well, other V.Ray versions, so please be sure to check it out if you're interested. Even as we are speaking, you can see our image is being rendered, and I'll take this time to continue with our webinar today. We exported to the cloud, and as you can see, it took us basically a few clicks, and the cloud, if you want to know, is credit-based, so you scale as much as you need to. It's rendering as we speak, and while we do so and wait for our image, I want to encourage you to go and test V.Ray Next if you haven't. As you see, it's constantly developing, even from the time we announced our webinar up to the time the webinar happened, we had an update. It's faster and easier than ever. The optimizations are adaptive, meaning that they actually take care of your personal scene and work on that. And if you happen to be working on GPU, now it's a great time to do so, because many features that were previously not supported on the GPU now are. And you can always take advantage of the cloud render if you want to scale quickly. If you're not sure, you can always go to Chaos Group's YouTube page, which is Chaos Group TV, and check a few more additional videos and clips there if you want to see additional features or other V.Ray versions. And be sure to also go to our YouTube page, AECO Space, where you can subscribe and you'll find this webinar, other webinars, and some interesting videos and tutorials. So this webinar will be uploaded here for you to watch later. And speaking of later, let's see what happened on the cloud. Our rendering is completed. You can see this is rendered on the cloud. It took us 1 minute and 22 seconds, 0.1 credits, and this is for this resolution. Of course, if you want bigger resolution or better quality, we could just adjust that from SketchUp and export again, and I can just go and download the whole image, which will download me multi-channel EXR and of course a JPEG preview of the image. So you can see from the cloud we have the multi-channel EXR and the JPEG preview directly, and you can always go and manage my projects here online, see what's being rendered, what is done, and download it at any computer at any time I like to. So go to our webpage, subscribe, check if you want to see anything additional, and you can always find us on social media if you have additional questions or just want to stay up to date with whatever we release. Our webpage, just for your information, and I want to say a big thank you for you for being here. I hope you enjoyed this webinar, found something interesting, exploring V.Ray Next Update 1 for SketchUp.